A podcast is one of the few ways you can create content and make instant money before you come out with any of the content. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a few of the podcast monetization strategies you can use to get up to $1,000 per month and even beyond based on how your podcast grows. I have 3 podcasts that really allow me to boost my income, gain more visibility, and I'm going to share with you some of the strategies that worked for me that can work for you as well. So if you like the idea of gaining more visibility and revenue, make sure you subscribe to this channel because that is what we talk about here all the time. So with podcast monetization, there's really 3 different types of audiences that you're able to monetize. The first audience is your listeners, and that's through when you offer a book or you do a sponsor. That's one way. Another way is to get sponsors for your show. So people who want to get on your show for additional exposure. And then finally are the actual guests who can become clients of your coaching or done for you service with a good follow-up and being really intentional with who you interview. These would also be JV partners for a launch you do later down the road. So I do a lot of virtual summits, and a lot of the speakers from my virtual summits who share the summit with their audience and who do so with an affiliate link, a lot of those people start out as guests on one of my podcasts. So those are different buckets that you have for podcast monetization. So the way that we actually approach this is first is going to be figuring out what you offer in your podcast. You want to offer something that connects with what the episode is about, connects with the main theme of your show, so it's a good fit for your listeners. And a big issue so many people run into, especially when they're first getting started, is I don't have sponsors. And there are ways to get sponsors, but a lot of it revolves around having a lot of listeners, which means it's very hard for a new podcast to embrace that monetization model. So what you can do instead is sponsor yourself, where you talk about your own product or service within the first few minutes of your podcast as a sponsorship clip, just as if you had a sponsor paying you per episode. You can also look for a really solid affiliate program with a really solid product and promote that. So in one of my videos, I talk about Optimized Press and ThriveCart being my entire setup for my websites, for my virtual summits. Those are 2 products I can promote very comfortably and confidently based on my experience. So those are the types of products for you that you can include as a sponsorship clip, where you're not getting paid to put that in the episode, but you are getting paid if someone buys through your affiliate link. The other option you have, we talked about guests earlier, and I think, and this is guests and listeners for this, because I feel so many people are not clear on what journey they want their people to take. I mean, we do have our product or service that we want to sell, but how do we get that transition? How do we go from a new person who's never heard of us to someone ends up buying our coaching or our book or course or what your offer is? So the first thing you have to do is think about who buys your offer. So for me, a lot of the people who want to start podcasts just based on what I have seen are authors. So I will make it a point to interview authors for my show. I will make it a point to participate in author-related communities to grow my listener base so that it's a lot of authors, because those are the types of people who want to learn how to get into podcasting. You can take my free 5-day mini course. If you have no idea how to launch one or what the tech even looks like, that's below in the description. And you also have people who want to figure out growth and monetization or just have someone else do the work for them and guide them, which would pretty much be my role. So you do want to get clear on what you're offering, what the journey looks like. So the introduction for the guest, you say, hey, I've seen your work. I'd love to have you on the show. You have a conversation, and then some guests become clients. From the listener perspective, it's what type of value do you want to provide in each episode that builds them up on their journey? So let's say for a podcast, one of the big things is time being a reason that people don't want to do a podcast. So an episode like 5 ways to cut down the amount of time it takes for you to manage a podcast, that's going to resonate with people. What's also going to resonate with people is something like a podcast monetization video similar to this one. People hear the strategies, they say, this makes a lot of sense, and I want you to do it for me, or I want you to go deeper on this with me. So understanding what that journey looks like and being intentional with who you bring on your show, because sometimes they won't become clients. They may not even do the JV thing with you. And it's important to not approach each interview like that. If someone becomes a client, I'm excited. But if someone doesn't become a client, I've had a lot of really great relationships with people who don't do client stuff, don't do JV stuff, etc. But another great way to look at this is almost all the people you have on your show are going to promote the episode if you give them the link and you say, hey, your episode's live, and that's going to introduce you to a new audience. So you can have a bunch of people on your show who help authors, using my example, and they're going to attract a bunch of new listeners who are authors or are thinking about writing their first book. So if you have an idea of what your avatar is, it's not just important to have some guests who fit that avatar. It's also important to have some guests who their audience fits that avatar. So now not only are you interviewing guests who you could build strategic relationships with that go beyond that one interview, but you are also bringing on a whole new listener base of people who are going to resonate very strongly with the offer that you mentioned within the first few minutes of the episode. It's good to mention within the first few minutes and then remind people about it at the very end, because some people may forget, or some people, when they first hear it, may want to take action, but they don't want to leave the episode. And then at the very end, you bring that offer back in, and that's going to be the moment where someone decides to take action. And then as you grow your audience even more, that's where sponsorships eventually come into play, where you are able to approach companies. And you don't just want to use your podcast here. One of the big mistakes, people just say, I have X amount of downloads, I have X amount of listeners, but the sponsor's not just getting your podcast listeners. So anytime you approach a sponsor, mention your social media followers, mention if you have a YouTube channel, a blog. You can use the podcast as a way to get the door open, but mention all of the other stuff you do, all the rest of your platform that goes beyond podcasting. That's going to allow you to command a higher price per episode when you mention all of those other features. So think about how you can do add-ons to the sponsorship. That's one of the things that's more down the road versus launching a podcast. Getting clients is something you could do before you even launch episode 1 because of the guests. And it's a great way for JV stuff. And then you are building listeners and getting more listeners one episode at a time, because you're promoting, the guest is promoting, and it just means more traction for your show. If you did enjoy these different strategies, one thing you may want to do is subscribe. Another thing you may want to do, if you do not have a podcast yet and you have no idea how to start, you may want to take my 5-day podcast launch mini course. In 5 days, you learn everything you need to know about launching your show, tech, how to do the interview, and everything like that. So definitely make sure the link is below in the description. Definitely make sure you check that out. If that is you don't have a podcast yet. And if you are looking for further guidance, you may want to schedule a free strategy call with me to see how we can work together. So with that said, signing off, dream big, achieve greatness, and unlock your potential today.